everybody, welcome back. Star Wars Minute, the daily podcast where we analyze, scrutinize, and there's no proof that Snow Maroney Stark dies. The Star Wars movies 1 minute at a time. I'm Pete the Retailer from PeteTheRetailer.com.
I'm Alex Robinson from AlexRobinson.fun.
And I'm Jamie Benning from Filmunentarian.com.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today, Jamie. I'm
thank you for having me.
Big fan of your work, and happy to have you here to talk about minute 30 of Star Wars Episode 8. It's The Last Jedi. Minute 8 starts with Kylo Ren making his attack run, and it ends with Kylo Ren coming around to make another attack run. He's about to. So
basically, cut the whole minute out. Nothing.
He's focused.
Nope.
He's got a.
He's focused.
Well, there are things here that I wanted to talk about. One is
Good.
right off the bat. We get this is Kylo Ren's what's it called, a silencer TIE fighter prototype.
Mm-hmm.
And I my original note, I was like, it's a little bit unnecessarily complicated missile launcher there. That's that's more of a, the original Star Wars has such a kind of like, well, could work in the real world. Everything looks kind of mechanical and gritty. And this is like, things folding out from other things. That's such a kind of sci-fi trope that we don't see too much in Star Wars. And made a note of it, wrote it down, moved on, and then I was looking up something else. I was looking up this TIE silencer itself, and one of the notes in the Wikipedia for the TIE silencer is that originally the missiles were just going to come from the bottom in a very natural kind of looking way. And then while they were in production at some point, I don't know if they were actually filming because this is mostly, ILM, this is mostly VFX shots. They got a prototype of what the toy was going to look like from Hasbro. Hasbro's like, here's the TIE silencer, and they looked and they're like, well, wait, the missiles come out from the sides, not from the bottom, and they're like, yeah, that's the way we had to make it. So then they changed the effects for the movie to match the toy prototype, which is a little bit the tail wagging the dog. Here. Yeah,
yeah.
And so it's something that
I was kind of struck by the maneuvering of the silencer. It reminded me of course, the end of Star Wars 1977, as I call it, where Vader's ship is kind of spinning away, and that's quite an interesting little side note from the original trilogy. Is that shot wasn't mentioned in some of the early scripts, some of the original scripts, and in fact, I think in the shooting script, it's not mentioned. It was added kind of later on. How late, I don't know. But if you look in some of the books like the J.W. Rinsler book, and I think the annotated script books, I think there's a mention in there that it was missing and it was added in quite late. Maybe when they realized maybe it's time for a sequel. Is it have we got room for a sequel, I should say. I'm sure it was always intended that Vader was gonna live, but right. It wasn't explicitly scripted. And I think that this is a little nod to that spinning.
It is consistent.
Well, we also know that Anakin thought spinning was a pretty good trick, and
yes.
from the. But I don't know. Is it a good trick? What is the advantage to spinning around like that versus just straight ahead shooting and not spinning yourself?
I think you're more likely to hit the oncoming projectiles. So not a good tactic.
You're creating the biggest surface area that you can so they can hit you.
But you're right about the complicated mechanism thing. My first thought was that it was very sort of Marvel in its approach, like, Iron Man's suit and things moving out and up, rather than the sort of simplicity that we're kind of used to in the Star Wars vehicles.
Yeah, I think eventually that Iron Man thing of stuff just popping out of nowhere and covering someone is gonna seem so late teens, like MCU, gimmick.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
so,
unless it just becomes normal, like unless we get more and more kind of nanotechnology like that, and then we get like, we'll watch other stuff. We'll watch like Star Wars, but like, why didn't the missile launcher just fold itself out of the out of Luke's X-wing to blow up the Death Star? Like, why don't we? We're
Listen, I can't even get my tent back in the bag that it came in. It's we're nowhere near that.
And so Kylo Ren spins his way through that dock. I like that kind of side dock thing. It's kind of reminiscent of Battlestar Galactica, both the original and the remake. It's got that good kind of, that well lit kind of hangar area that you can just fly right through. You can in the back, out the front. It's kind of a weird. It makes sense that it's like an aircraft cover with a canopy strapped to the side of the ship, essentially.
Yeah, I guess, because I was going to say it would make sense to have a door on it, at least on one end, so that you can't literally just go into a bombing strafe and then just leave without any kind of interference. But we don't see many doors in Star Wars, like spaceship doors to the outside. Like we see obviously inside blast doors, but most of the time spaceships land, it's that kind of see-through force field kind of docking bay sort of thing they have going on here. So they should at least have had that on the. It's not like they're in the middle of a battle where they have to have ships coming in and out.
No, they were scrambling the fighters. They were coming, so they opened the doors because the ships were about to pass through, I think.
Okay. Yeah,
we do see a door towards the end of the scene, don't we? I'm jumping ahead, and I'll try not to, but we do see a door closing on the explosion. So there is some kind of security there. But it does seem like a pretty big flaw, doesn't it? It reminded me of Anakin attacking the ship in the end of the Phantom Menace. The kind of approach of just going in, and at least he didn't hit the deck here and slide on his way on in.
That's true.
Although if they had just done kind of a 1-for-1 tribute to that, it would have been like, okay. It's Kylo Ren.
We're getting nostalgic about the Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
Revenge of the Sith also features a scene where Anakin flies into a ship, and him and Obi-Wan fly into a landing bay at the beginning of the Revenge of the Sith too. So it's definitely a Skywalker, every other generation kind of tick that they develop.
Flies right in there.
Yeah. So we see, Jamie said, we see the docking bay getting destroyed by Kylo Ren shooting it with missiles. And does Lady Pilot Tally get killed in this?
Oh, she gets very exploded. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. She also looks about 12 years old. It's like we're about to see, some young rebels be murdered here.
Yeah.
Child soldiers.
Well, it's, Resistance Babies. It was a new spin-off that they were working on, but then it, or I guess it would be my high school Resistance spin-off show. Tally, she's, again, this is minute 30. For somebody who's only in the movie, who dies a half hour into the movie, she's got a pretty strong kind of internet following. People on the internet like Tally.
Yeah.
And, reasonably so. I wonder, compare Tally's screen time in this to, let's say, Wedge's screen time in the original. I bet, she probably has more. I don't know. Well, maybe not. Wedge has a good couple of things there, but then she explodes.
I think with Wedge, and I think with Wedge as well. You kind of imagined what he then went on to do,
right?
Which is not possible here because we see very much she is toast. Yeah,
Dak, is she like Dak?
Yeah, maybe
a little like Dak. I feel like as much as I like Dak, he doesn't have the strong internet follow. Although if Empire had come out today, I'm sure there'd be Dak, fan pages and stuff like that. Are fan pages even still a thing? There'd be like Dak TikToks, TikTok Dak.
TikTok.
Somebody else who's damaged in this explosion but does not perish is our friend BB8. BB8 gets decapitated.
Yeah. Does that count as a Star Wars dismemberment? You know what I mean? How the Disney films are relatively light on dismemberment.
And it's played for comedy here, isn't it? A little bit. And then you get kind of squealing. We've just seen a dozen rebels murdered in a fireball. Let's throw some comedy in quickly.
Right, yeah.
Which I think this film suffers from a bit of a misjudgment of when to use comedy. I say a little bit, I mean a lot.
Are there jokes that you think do work in it that you remember? Or any particular egregious examples of bad ones? Because I always say the one about Hugs' mother is that one is to me the most egregious.
Throughout this movie, for me, I was struggling with the approach to humor. It didn't quite sit. It's like as soon as there comes a moment where it could get serious, they get scared and just feel like they need to throw in something funny to kind of counteract it. We don't want to this is for kids. Yeah. So we've shown some murdering. Now we show a droid screaming with his head falling off. Yeah.
Right.
They should have had Tally's body laying right behind, her battered body laying behind BB-8 as he's doing all his charming little, and, she's laying there.
Or her head rolling through as well, and then not rejoining with her body.
Yeah, hers is stuck there.
A bit too dark, maybe.
Yeah, this is going to turn very quickly into C-3PO's head on a battle droid's body if we're not careful.
Oh, no.
We're going to have
like BB-8 accidentally grabs Tally's head to put on, and then
yeah.
PTSD going on now.
But yeah, well, it makes me wonder what part it's kind of like the maybe the Iron Giant or something like that, where it's like at what point is it not BB-8? Like, is BB-8's essence contained in the head unit? Like, can you just take BB-8's head and put it on a different ball and he'd be BB-8 still? Or is it like is it only in the, is it just kind of an automated program that just rejoins the two halves, and only when it's together is he really BB-8? But like, how much could you get away with BB? Like, I kind of want to see, like you said, C-3PO's head on a battle droid, like that kind of a thing. Like, what if BB-8's head ended up on a different BB droid body or on a different thing altogether?
I really like the idea of his head being the main, like basically the hard drive part.
Right.
And the body is just all the mechanical, parts. So that if you wanted to, if you needed to like transport BB-8, you could just take his head off, put it in your carry-on bag, and it's a lot easier than carrying around that big roller ball. So I like that idea. And like you said, that way you just need to replace. You could just replace him by component rather than have to buy a whole new droid.
Well, maybe there'll be a spin-off comic about the different balls he's had throughout the generations.
There you go. And they look like the first ones look all kind of rough and
obviously it'd be like a boulder.
Yeah. Then in the future it's all slick and kind of like clear with stuff and like sparkles inside or something like that.
I think the designers are just showing off a little bit here, aren't they? Just saying that, here's this cool design, but also his head comes off.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe there's another action figure in it as well. So is there one with a detachable head? Cynical thinking now.
I think maybe that does like when the Force Awakens came out, they made that app controlled BB-8 that you could drive around, and it was basically the ball part was more or less like a billiard ball. It was solid, and then all the controls and stuff were in the top part. And so maybe that, like, based on that, like, I've seen kids just drive that around and right into a wall, and the head flies off, and it's it's not attached; it's just lying on it. So maybe it's based on, they're like, oh, we'll give kids that experience too. All the kids that have bought that Sphero thing just ran it into a wall and his head came off. We'll make that part of the story too.
Maybe it's like a worm where you take his head off in his body, and then eventually the body will regrow a new head, and the head will then regrow a new body.
There you go. So
BB16.
Yeah. I was going to say, or is that two BB4s? But we've seen two. We saw BB4 earlier.
Yeah.
Before. We saw BB4 before.
BB4.
I really like the stunt work we see here with Poe Dameron being thrown around during the big explosion. I think it has a real sense of physicalness to it and stuff. So compliments to them on that. Little detail, good explosions and stunt work and stuff. I was thinking Tally might have survived because she's inside a ship when that happens. So it's almost like, if it's just fire around her, then she could survive. But if it's like debris and stuff, that would be harder to.
I think her cockpit is open. She was like, for all the last couple of minutes, all we saw was like dun 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 dun. Everybody's getting ready and putting their cockpits down and then we cut to her in this minute, and she's just like doing a crossword or something. I think it was like that hurry up and wait kind of, like they got everything ready to go, and they were just waiting for the order to fly out, and then they're just sitting there for a while. Because I'm pretty sure maybe her cockpit's not open, but we definitely see her pretty blown up. And according to the Wikipedia, she has perished. Whereas, as I said in the opening, we don't see Stomaroni Stark blow up, and we don't. Wikipedia unclear. It just says he was there. Maybe he survived.
And we find out that Poe Dameron is invincible as well at this point, and is actually not a human; he's a droid.
That'd be great. After the big explosion, you just see through his tattered flight suit. There's a Superman symbol, and you're like, "Oh!" All of a sudden, the franchise changes.
There'd be like mechanical parts inside of him. Like
right.
He's discovering that he's actually been a cyborg all along.
Oh, and that's why he was excited to give Finn a new name. He's like FN 2187. No, I'm going to call you Finn, and they're like, oh, he's P0. DM4N or something like that.
I also think this scene shows that Poe Dameron's not particularly popular in the Resistance, because you could just see his colleagues kind of running past in the background. There are people running away from him. There are people running in the opposite direction, like down the corridor, just leaving him there with this beheaded droid. You're on your own now. Sorry.
A couple of them just throwing in a quick kick as they pass by while he's laying there on the deck. He was supposed to die in the first movie, so maybe they are all resentful, or maybe he's a ghost.
Oh, he's Boo Dameron. Yeah, I don't know.
Actually, Finn does come running in.
Well, yeah, Finn's main connection again. It's an interesting wrinkle, character-wise. His only drive seems to be like mainly looking out for Rey, and then also looking out for himself, and then to a certain extent looking out for his buddy Poe. Like that's, he's, as we've discussed, he's kind of not given enough to do other than where's Rey? Where's Rey? Poe, are you okay? Like talking to Poe, being a buddy with Poe, and asking where Rey is. And outside of that, they don't give him too much to do. Which again, ripple effect, I think, coming back from Poe not dying in the first movie created an extra character problem. But speaking of extra characters, we get somebody who's kind of, more or less an important part of this, but doesn't, feels like they should be more of an important part of this at some points, but they're relegated to background status. That's Admiral Akbar.
Cadet Akbar now. Ensign Akbar now. He's Ensign Akbar now.
Right. Yeah, we had the theory that he's been demoted. He's been busted down to ensign, because he's kind of in charge of the fleet, but not. I mean, I guess it's thinking back to like some of the the Star Trek episodes where like all of a sudden there's a Commodore on the bridge who's telling Kirk what to do the whole time, and maybe it's kind of like that. Like Akbar's in charge of his ship, he's in charge of the fleet, but when all the Resistance leaders are on the ship with him, it's like a lot of people above him telling him what to do, and he's just like, we're gonna do what? Okay.
Yeah, so Poe says, we got to get away from that Star Destroyer, and then it cuts to Admiral Akbar going, we need to do what? And then later.
But he's like in the background, like, he's not in close-up, is he? Yeah, he's just sort of like this speck in the background. What is the story behind him being used so little in this film?
I think this week we looked up that I think the original voice actor, Eric Bowersfield, had passed away between The Last Jedi and... between Force Awakens and Last Jedi, I think, or right around the time that they were making this. So I think that not having, they probably could have replaced him easily. There's a lot of people that can do an Akbar voice, but it's weird because it's not entirely a tribute either, because they're just like, oh yeah, Akbar's dead. He flew out the window. Like,
by the way,
they don't give him a kind of a send off, and I don't necessarily, he's more of a meme than a character. As much as I like him, I don't think that narratively he deserved a send off, but it is a weird kind of like neither nor, where it's like, okay, we're gonna have him in here just to shout a couple of lines, then he's gonna die off screen.
It almost feels like they felt like they had to include him because of fan pressure or something, but they didn't want to actually bother, like, doing anything with him. So they're like, all right, put him in the background and have him just, cue Carrie's lines for her. We're going to what? So.
Yeah, I wonder how much of this, it besides the, we talk about the TIE silencer, but, I've heard stories of the people who used to work on the G.I. Joe, cartoons and comic books just every once in a while they'd get a folder from Hasbro for saying like, okay, well here are the new things, and you got to work those into your stories. So they're like, all right, well, we'll put the snowmobile and the snow trooper and the hang glider in this story. We'll just write a story around that. And I wonder, now that I know that about the TIE Silencer, I wonder how much of it is like, okay, we've got an Akbar figure, so you got to throw him in there. We got to go, like. Here's
well,
a list
I can tell you because I interviewed on my podcast, the Filmumentaries podcast, quick plug. I interviewed the industrial designer Nilo Rodis Jamiro, who on Empire designed a lot of vehicles and things, but also was the costume designer and creature designer for Return of the Jedi. And I know that there was a process where Akbar was just one of many characters that had been invented by that team. And then it was picked out to be him that was going to be the Admiral Akbar character that was written into the script. And then I spoke to Tim Rose as well, who was the puppeteer that helped build at Tippett Studios, or ILM, with Phil Tippett at the time, helped build the Akbar puppet and getting the eyes just right so it could focus on a certain point, because, the eyes are the window to the soul and everything, and they wanted to make sure that all of that worked. So Akbar was just going to be this background character for some time, and then he was kind of elevated to this position. And Tim did actually tell me that on Return of the Jedi they had weeks, if not months, of build and rehearsal time, and on the sequels they barely had a moment with the animatronics and the puppet. They didn't have proper time to rehearse, and so they weren't able to achieve what they wanted to achieve with the puppet. So maybe that's why here we see him relegated to the background.
That's interesting to know.
Yeah.
And,
I bet. Like,
would you rather have? I guess it's a shame, but
yeah. Would you rather have this level of just kind of more or less background Akbar, or would you rather have just kind of a kind of off-brand looking Admiral Akbar if they couldn't get it enough practice time?
I think the biggest problem is that, as you say, is the meme thing. How are you going to out-meme the meme? And when I first came across Admiral Akbar, it would have been late 1982, was it, when you could send off your Kenner proof of purchases to get Akbar in the mail? And I remember one per household, so I did it for myself, for my grandparents' house, my other grandparents' house, and I got a whole bunch of Akbars. So maybe in the way that he was quickly posted to me, they just wanted to post him out the window of this cruiser. Right. To finish his life. Maybe that was the approach. But yeah, I mean, if you can't get it right, maybe it was the best for him not to be shown in super close up.
See, I think if they weren't going to have him, I think they should have had him be like enormously fat, wearing like a real old school admiral's kind of costume, braids, and like to show that he's really just kind of like a figurehead sort of, like he can't really, he's not really listening to anything, like lean into that big, part of it rather
kind of modern Major General hat,
like the Napoleon type of Napoleon, they just humor him, and but then like you're right, how much attention do they really want? Do they really want everyone to like, wait a minute, who's that guy in the background? The fish with
maybe like with a beard, or like barbed, like some old fish kind of,
right?
Yeah, totally.
And with little like parasite fish or stuff like growing on him.
A few barnacles.
Yeah. I if this wasn't, and again, Star Wars, what is Star Wars and what isn't Star Wars is a whole bag of worms or kettle of calamari. But if this was a different franchise, let's say if this was a Marvel movie, in this case, like knowing that he is essentially, a meme for It's a Trap, like I feel like this is an easy opportunity for them to be like, right before he gets blown up, he could start to be like, it's up, and then blow up or something like that. You know what I mean? If this was a Marvel movie or if this was a different franchise altogether, I feel like that's a direction that probably at least had to come up maybe at some point, but they're like, no, we're taking this more seriously. Although then there's a lot of points where they're not taking it as seriously. So it's an interesting wrinkle that they're, I feel like that is I'm glad they didn't do that, because then you end up with stuff that, is topical at the time, and then years later you go back and you watch it and you're like, why is he telling me he's the Juggernaut? Like, that is a kind of
I think JJ clearly wasn't interested in having Admiral Akbar front and center here. He seems to be more interested in crew running around. If you compare kind of like the rebels from the original movies to the resistance fighters here, they're a much more panicky bunch, aren't they? There's just lots of running around. I think in this scene you see like at least 8 or 10 people running in different directions with clipboards and carrying various bits of equipment. It's like they're kind of abandoning Cloud City all over again.
Yeah. It's another meme that should have been in here. They should have definitely had Wilbur Hood running through. They got the ice cream maker just kind of off, looking confused where to go as they scramble the ships.
Yeah. Although now we know that they're really storage devices for crystals.
It's a Camtono of whatever.
Lisa, leaning into my old Admiral Akbar joke, the fact that his first line is "We need to what?"
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't tell if he's skeptical of her plan or whether he just can't hear her.
He's old and hard of hearing.
Yeah, we need to what? And then she says, "Oh, the fighters will fall back." He's like, "Yes, the writers should call back."
Move our feet out of range? I don't understand. What?
He just shouts what time it is and takes a sip from his tea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Watching the news really loudly over in his corner.
So why is Akbar like 90 feet away or 30 meters away from she should be like sitting in the Commander Riker spot next to if she's barking orders to him, who then commands orders to everyone else. Anyway.
Yeah.
Nitpicking.
I mean, I think
that's why we're here,
because you've got two different command areas. He's kind of controlling his ship and more or less the fleet, but she's in charge of the whole operation there.
Well, so you're saying Admiral Akbar is just in charge of the Radis.
And presumably the couple of ships that go, like he's telling the fleet what to do directly, but Leia's also commanding the Akbar's commanding the big ships, telling them what to do. Leia's in charge of the whole operation, telling the support crews what to do, telling the fighters what to do, all that. But and so you can't, if you have them right next to each other, there's probably going to be a lot of crosstalk and people, like,
right?
Oh, did you just say launch? You're like, no, that was the other guy.
I was going to say, if you look closer, you can see actually the reason that Akbar is struggling to listen is that his colleague, his Mon Calamari colleague, is on a keyboard there and he's just playing his new track to him.
Yeah, and those fingers, those calamari fingers, they're not good. They're not good keyboard fingers. So
he's playing the dramatic battle music, like
like one of those improv piano players that he's watching everything that's going on.
While going. No, not that one. We did that one. I love the continuity of having, if not Akbar specifically, the Mon Calamari being involved in the fleet, and they're the ones who build these giant ships, or at least commission these giant ships. So it's a cool little thread that's not really necessary to anything, but it's nice to have, little bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Although I don't like seeing shields. And I
was just going to bring that up. Actually, it was my next question. I was going to move over to the space battle and the bubble shields we see.
I don't know why it bothers me so much. It's a consistently because we didn't see them really in Star Wars or Empire or Jedi. I don't like seeing them. I like the idea that they're there, and you don't have to see them in order to. I know that originally we didn't see them because we didn't have the technology to make that happen without and have it look reasonably realistic, but I don't like seeing them. Even here in the prequels, in the sequels, it looks out of place to me, and I accept the fact that the shields are blocking that. I don't need to know.
Yeah. I do love the sound of the shields being hit. That kind of like boom, boom. It has a nice, satisfying thump sound to it. Mm-hmm. But the visible bubble shields are too Star Trek-y for me.
Yeah, same. So. I agree. It sort of removes a bit of the kind of peril that you should be feeling for those big chunks of hardware in space, to me. Yeah. When you see a shield there, it kind of adds another level of kind of, I don't know, almost like magic that wasn't there in the original movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in the original ones, they could say the shields, and you don't know whether it is I mean, it literally the first time you hear it is the Millennium Falcon saying, "Oh, we're losing the deflector shields," and I mean, is it literally like metal on the ship that is flying off, or is it like a? I always thought it was just more like a kind of like a, I don't know, something that kind of like was just very, more like shrink wrapped. Like the shield was just kind of like literally on the surface of the thing, which is why when the ship would get hit, it would still move and stuff like that. But it was just like an additional layer of, because it seems like if it's in one of those bubbles, like, and you shot at it, the ship shouldn't be jostled. It should be like bubble wrap thing, but you still see it, moving around and stuff. So,
although there's different ships. Again, it's weird if there weren't these kinds of shields in the prequels, you could say like, oh well, shields have evolved, and this is they've been able to grow a wider area around them. But then it's like, well, we had them before, and then we didn't have them for a little while, but now we have them again, and it's I
could argue that maybe the Empire cut like limited shield technology.
That's true.
Only
it was illegal to have stronger shields.
Yeah.
I think the Falcon definitely is going to be a different. It's going to have a lot of different stuff than a big capital cruiser. So like maybe the Falcon's shields are more like shrink wrap, where they're just tighter to it.
Yeah.
But do you remember a time though when Star Wars wasn't in the kind of Star Trek realm? The science of how things would work was not part of being a fan of Star Wars. I think the first time I came across it was those. Do you remember those magazines that came out in the 90s? They were like more expensive than a magazine, not as expensive as a book, and it was like technical plans and schematics for all the ships. It's the first time I remember seeing that stuff and thinking, oh, we're going down another rabbit hole now.
There's one, I can't reach it from here without getting off camera, but there's a stack of 2 or 3 of those that a reader sent us, a listener sent us, that's under my desk right now. Those exact ones from the 90s where it's like, here's all the technical, although there was the blueprint set from the 70s.
That was more the blueprints of the items themselves,
sets.
Like to be built as sets, or
it was a little bit like it's more like a cool kind of diagram of it where it wasn't explaining every. All right, here's the ion projector. It was just kind of like, yep, here's the wing. Like, okay, I get that that's a wing.
Yeah, so I guess what we're saying is really the original trilogy gave us the ability to sort of use our imaginations as to how these things would work, and having it spelt out sometimes is a little bit kind of distracting in a way.
Well, I think that's the lesson overall at Star Wars, is that the what our imaginations come up with is almost always better than what we see on the screen. In terms of like an explanation for something, like, what was Anakin like as a kid, or what were the Clone Wars like? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
it was different than what I thought it was, but I guess that's an explanation. So,
and that's even what a lot of people's complaints about the sequel trilogy, whatever complaints they have, a lot of them boil down to not matching their expectations, which again, there's not. It's reasonable to have expectations about this kind of a thing, but it's like it doesn't make something bad when it doesn't meet your expectations. It's just not what you were looking for, and
right.
The Star Wars is such a vast thing that I don't think there's no way it's going to please everybody all the time and still be good.
No,
you can probably make a really bland, boring thing that everybody will be like, oh, that was okay, but it's I don't know. The more there is, the more fractured it's going to be, I'm afraid.
I do remember seeing this. I saw this in a midnight screening with The Force Awakens beforehand. And I remember going outside. They said, everyone, okay, let's just, leave while we sort a few things out. And we went out the front, and we were all kind of really optimistic about what was gonna come. And even my friend, who was very cynical about The Force Awakens and the sequels as a whole, was optimistic. And we went back in, and within 5 minutes, we were both kind of looking at each other thinking, oh no, this is not for us either. And it was a really disappointing moment, actually. I remember we went back to his place and stayed up most of the night, just kind of talking about all the things we thought were wrong about it. And then, you know what? We got it out of our system and we moved on. We didn't feel the need to go online and tear into people about this movie.
You mean you didn't yell at the people involved in making the movie? How could you process your feelings without doing that?
Yeah.
You at least signed the petition, right? You at least had to sign the petition.
To get it remade, sure.
Yeah.
That made perfect sense at the time.
Have you revisited it since then? Has your assessment changed, or do you still find yourself disappointed with it?
I still find myself very disappointed with it. I bought it on Blu-ray to get the documentary, behind the scenes stuff. And when you guys invited me on, I must admit, I thought, oh, and I watched this minute, and I realized I had no memory of it whatsoever. I would genuinely swear in a court of law that I had not seen that minute. I remember the kind of gist of it, what he's doing, what Kylo Ren is doing, and what happens to our princess and so on. But I genuinely have no visual memory of that minute whatsoever. And I've seen it at least twice. Have I seen it twice? No, I saw it with my friend, and then I didn't want to take my kids to see it, so my wife took my kids. So I think I have seen it once. And maybe a few bits here and there. Yeah, I kind of came. Go on.
No, I was just asked. Does this mean that you will not be doing filmumentaries on the making of these? Or will you swallow your personal distaste for them in the interest of knowledge?
People have asked me that about the prequels as well, and enough time has passed I think to answer that question for myself as well as those people asking it. I think the stuff that I'm interested in is when you find like a pivotal point in the movie industry or something. Like I'm thinking at the moment about doing something with Jurassic Park because I think that fits that criteria.
Sure.
I'm not sure this is going to have the kind of the cultural impact or the kind of impact on the film industry that kind of defines or meets the criteria of something that I want to do. I'm not saying no, because who knows? Maybe there's some amazing VFX techniques that have never been seen before in this movie. I just didn't connect with it, and my kids quite enjoyed it, and it was that moment where I kind of went, this is for them. Okay, Daddy can keep his old busty ones, and you kids can enjoy these new ones.
Right. You're like Akbar. You're over in the corner with your own thing. Like, what?
Yeah, I've got, my friends on the keyboard. I've got my ear trumpet. Yeah.
I do. There is a surprising amount of. I was surprised by some of the effect stuff. Some of the way that they kind of blended. I feel like we're in a almost a third age or fourth. I don't know how you break it down, but the Star Wars, the original trilogy, kind of represents the kind of the miniatures and the kind of the matte work, that all kind of classic special effects era, and then to whatever extent the content is up your alley or not, then the prequels really represent kind of a pinnacle of that, the kind of all green or blue screen and CGI sets and everything like that, and and then this trilogy, I was amazed at how much stuff was not computer generated when I thought it was, even after watching the movie with these, in that they did a real synthesis of both methods, that they did a lot of practical effects and a lot of computer stuff to kind of enhance that and handshake it. But even some of the not from this movie, but there's in Solo, where Alex and I were at the Star Wars Celebration a couple of years ago, and they I think it's Neil Scanlon who does the creature shop for this, and they brought out one of the creature heads that I totally assumed it's in the card game scene. There's a creature who has multiple eyes, all bobbling around his head, and I would have sworn that was a computer generated creature because it totally looks like it. But then here he is. He brings the head out and just kind of sets it down on the table, and then the eyes are moving around and looking at stuff, and it's like, we're at the. I don't want to call it a perfect synthesis, but we're at a really amazing point where the line is truly blurred and everything just looks more or less realistic, and you can use both tools at your, to make things look like they fit in, which is I don't know if that qualifies as another kind of point in technology, but they really made a and I don't want to call it a course correction, but they really starting with, I feel like J.J. Abrams setting the tone, saying like, hey, I want to do as much of this practical as we can and use the tools that we have in our toolbox.
Yeah, I think it's finally having that understanding in the effects industry about what works best for each situation, and not just applying a blanket idea to a movie as a whole. I was speaking to somebody just the other day called Pat McClung, who worked on my podcast. It's coming out in a couple of weeks, the episode about some of the movies he worked on: Die Hard, Ghostbusters, Empire Strikes Back, True Lies, and
never heard of him.
He was talking, small movies, little movies. He was talking about that exact thing, about his part of the industry, having worked on miniatures, when he saw Jurassic Park, just thinking, oh my goodness, we're finished. But really, that film being a really good synthesis of all those different technologies, new emerging technology, as well as using practical where it wasn't possible to do stuff in CGI at the time. And I think now there does seem to be an appreciation. I was worried there was just some sort of unfounded or misguided nostalgia for it. Let's just do it for the sake of doing it because it's cool and it'll be a good story.
Right.
But I think there is genuinely, with The Mandalorian, they've been doing it with the Razor Crest, but they're doing it because they can use the LED screens to reflect on the silver model and give you a better lighting than maybe a CG model might do. So yeah, it's all to do with the understanding, isn't it, ultimately? And then maybe this film represents that in the sequel trilogy.
I also feel like it'll be interesting for future Filmunentarians because Disney has been very tight-lipped about, there's certainly been a lot of interesting behind the scenes chaos between Solo and Rise of Skywalker, and but they don't seem to be, letting people in on that sort of their that's family business. That's not the public's business.
I've just started watching Into the Unknown, which is the series of the making of Frozen 2. I wouldn't say the film is necessarily my cup of tea. I do have 3 daughters who have watched it many, many times, but it's a really kind of no holds barred kind of insight into the creative process of that film and how they were taking things out of it and stripping it back to its core with weeks and months to go, and just how difficult it is to find cohesion and make a product that makes sense, where every scene makes sense and moves the story forward. And having that worry about, you've got these legacy characters, even from a movie just a few years ago, that they need to kind of satisfy the audience of and the fans of. It would be interesting to get more of an insight on these films as well, wouldn't it? Just to see really the thought processes behind it. Because they're finished now, they're done. They're never going to change them. So let's just see what happened, and maybe in making it, but maybe in releasing something like that, we could, they could learn from it. We could learn from it. It's I'm aware that people's careers are at stake, but hey.
I think we have to wait for someone else to like a new leadership to come in, because they'll want to throw the old leadership under the bus. So we have to wait until that happens, until they're like, look how terrible they were, and that old back then. So
right. Yeah, I wonder, like, just once we're outside of now that the Skywalker saga is ended, I wonder if they'll give it a little bit of time and then put stuff out there. I think I can understand them not wanting to, while the bus is moving, not wanting to kind of, show mixing metaphors there, but while the bus is moving, I didn't want to show you how the sausage is made. But
it's like a tour of the sausage factory.
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
on a bus.
But now that we're a little bit removed from that, I wonder if they would go back and start putting, especially, the Disney Plus is the perfect. I feel like, when we had Laserdiscs and DVDs that were first a thing, and then there was all the bonus materials and commentary and all this stuff, and it was great. And then it kind of faded a little bit as we moved to streaming. But now with in-house streaming services like Disney Plus, they're like, oh, here, here's a bunch of the extras, and you can sit there and watch all of them. And then they're producing new extras for stuff gone by. So I think it's the perfect place for that, and I'm assuming that they would do that as a, they know how to make money, Disney. I think down the road that they have, they'll keep stuff in their pocket. They're not going to play their cards. Oh, I got metaphors all over the place, but they're not going to play their cards too early, knowing whether if we save that for a lull, if we have a dip in subscriptions, we could just play here's a new making of The Last Jedi card that we can play. And it's like, oh, okay, I'll watch that. I'll sign up.
I think it was Roddy McDowell. I found a clip of him talking about how he's not interested in the process of making movies unless 30 to 50 years has passed. This was when I was researching and working on something for Planet of the Apes for Fox. Maybe we just need to wait for 30 years to pass, and then the box will be opened. And will I still be? Yeah. Oh no, I'll be in my 70s. I'll have retired by then. Oh well.
Yeah, I hope they're at least like having someone go around and do interviews with everyone, even if they don't intend to release them for 30 years, just so we have some firsthand, knowledge and so on. So
right. Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Archival interviews.
Yeah.
Well, so
I think
that's all I got for minute 30.
All we had for 30. Jamie, is there anything else you wanted to do for this minute or for the movie in general? Anything else that...
Don't think so. I really feel bad for not having the time to watch it again today and remind myself. Do you know what? I think despite saying what I said about not liking it, there were definitely some great bits in it. And I think, I think I will revisit it at some point, like the other two in this sequel trilogy. But because my focus at the moment is very much about the films I kind of grew up on and, doing my podcast and my filmumentaries and stuff, I tend to have great reverence for those things. And I've now reached that age. I'm 45 this year. I've now reached that age where you can just decide that everything new is just not up to scratch. But I'm what I am glad about is that there are people who absolutely adore this movie, because I know what that feeling is like when you fall in love with a movie and you want to know everything about it and you want to kind of defend your position of loving it. It's just a shame there are some people that are so far on the other side of the fence that it causes so much toxicity. Yeah,
it bothers them that other people love it for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like it, but I love the fact that people love it. And I said that when I first saw it. I said, I'm really glad you had a great time watching it, and there was no sort of malice or sarcasm in there. I genuinely was pleased that people had come out and thought, yes, that's my Star Wars. I think that's great.
It's hard to convey that though without sounding,
yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I don't know what emoji
I'm
goes
in that
after
position
that
all
one.
the time. I feel like
right. And again, the prospect of, well, if you don't like this one, there's another one coming down the road at some point. You know what I mean? They're going to keep making these, so it's not like it was where it was closed off and it was like, well, there was Star Wars and then the prequels came out and then that's it, and then it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And I have to say, each time there was that, I did kind of fall for it. I was like, maybe this time, maybe the Rise of Skywalker is my. Oh no.
Rebellions are built on hope.
Yeah, there you go. There's always going to be a new one down the road somewhere. Well, speaking of there being a new one down the road, there will be new episodes down the road for us. We're over the weekend. If you want to hear from us, you could listen. Sign up for our Patreon. That's StarWarsMinute.com/Patreon. Jamie, you've got a Patreon for Filmumentaries, I believe. Do you not?
I do. It's patreon.com/Jamie Benning. Yeah, it's for all my Filmumentary stuff. Yeah.
Which, again, recommended. Everybody should go check that out. And then...
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us for this All-Star Week, Jamie. And listeners, hopefully we'll catch you back here on Monday for a brand new Star Wars Minute.